Mayor Beverly Burks, and welcome to the work session on Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. At this time, we will have roll call. I am Beverly Burks, and I'm present. Next, we'll have Vice Mayor Yasu, Councilman Carroll,
I'm present.
Councilman Hassan,
Present.
Councilwoman Hopkins,
Present.
and Councilwoman Johnson.
Present.
Thank you. And so for the work session, resident comment policy. Any member of the public may address questions or comments to the council referencing only agenda items after the mayor and council have had the opportunity to discuss the agenda item. Each attendee will be allowed 3 minutes for comments. And at this time, we will have a presentation for 2021 Waterway Cleanup on March 27th. Mr. Gomez.
Good evening. This is Robin Gomez, the Clarkston City Manager. We're going to have a brief presentation from the city's engineering stormwater firm, Collaborative Infrastructure Services. And it will be on our annual Waterway Cleanup, where city staff, along with the firm vendor that I mentioned, along with volunteers, clean up a couple of different sites throughout the city related to some of our waterways to remove trash, debris, other items from our creeks and other waterways. So we encourage and certainly invite folks to come out on Saturday, March the 27th. It's going to be a very fun time, I guarantee it, and a chance to help out our city, do a very good deed for the day. And I'm going to turn it over here in just a moment to, I guess I'll turn it over to Mr. Kaiser and Mr. Atami. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. I have with me today Cash Atami with the firm of Collaborative Infrastructure Services. He is going to give a brief presentation on the annual volunteer waterway cleanup event. And it should take 5 minutes or less. So Cash Atami, go ahead and proceed. I hope he proceeds. Cash, you unmuted yourself?
Sorry about that. Yes, just using a backup computer, so a little slow. Okay, good evening, Mayor and the Council. Thank you for your time. We are, what I'm presenting tonight is our little quick presentation about our event that we're doing, as Mr. Gomez mentioned. Robin, would you like to scroll through this for us, or would you like me to share a screen? Okay, that works.
No.
Okay. So just to give a quick background on the events to everybody, we, as part of our permit that we have with the Georgia EPD, we are required to do a few events throughout the year. Some are public involvements events, some are public education events. In this case, public involvement includes doing a stream cleanup. We like to call it a waterway cleanup, as it's not always streams. But essentially, we're just gonna get some volunteers along with our public work staff and pick out different sections and waterways in the city to pick up trash, debris, tires, all kinds of stuff that we find. So hopefully this year would be this year would be as good as last. Last year's event was the first one that we had in quite a few years, so we're trying to get back on the schedule. The way we are trying to advertise the event to the public is through the city website and our social media campaigns through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Those will be going up this week. We have distributed some flyers at local businesses and really anywhere that we can. I know with the schools and colleges being out, that's kind of taken away from a little bit of our efforts, but we're going to try to make up for it. Last year, we hit about 30 different locations throughout the city. We also have some banners going up at different locations. We have 5 or 6 this year going up, at major intersections, major areas where there's a lot of foot traffic and car traffic, so that, we get the word out as much as we can. Let's see if I get to the next slide. Okay. Let's see. COVID situation that we have, obviously, we've made some changes to our protocols. Obviously, we're gonna adhere to the social distancing guidelines. We're gonna have sign-in sheets and waiver sheets as we had last year. We're gonna, along with our public works department, we're gonna obviously provide some refreshments for the volunteers. We're gonna give out masks. We have some neck coverings, neck gaiters, I guess they call them, that Rivers needed. Pickup sticks for the volunteers. But as always, we encourage everybody to bring their own stuff to, if they don't feel comfortable or whatever. And depending on that time of the year, if there is, insects or whatever, we're going to have insect repellents. So long sleeve and pants are encouraged. Next slide, please. Just to give you a recap of last year's event, we had over 65 volunteers. Majority of that was from a youth group. I don't recall their name exactly, but I hope that they show up again this year. Collectively, we collected over 70 trash bags, over 20 tires, and overall was over 2,300 pounds of trash from almost a mile of South Fork Peachtree Creek, from Friendship Forest all the way up to the 285 city limit. We had it kind of broken down into 4 different sections. So that's quite a bit of debris and trash that was removed from that creek. So that was a great event. So for this year, we were planning on doing almost the same. Last year, there was a little bit of a difficulty as far as reaching some areas. So this year, we've modified it so that it'll be a little easier to access for the volunteers. We're still going to do the first section of Friendship Forest, as you see on the top right. We all meet at the parking lot of Friendship Forest, and that's a fairly easy area to access all the way up to Montreal Road, and they can exit from Montreal Road near the bridge. Second section is at 40 Oaks. We'll transport the folks, via bus or a church bus. We're in the process of getting that lined up as well. A few folks would go down to 40 Oaks, and they'll be, cleaning that area. And last section, just in case we have a lot of volunteers and want to get as much of it as we can, is Smith Street at North Indian Creek. We actually recently, last year, developed or had a project that we replaced the culvert pipe that was between 2 apartment complexes that was, eroded and was leading to a lot of floodings on Smith Street. So we ended up cleaning that. In the process, I saw that there was quite a bit of, trash and debris in that little stream where it's clouded yellow. And it's not a long section, but it has a good bit of litter that can be removed. So that's the third section. Depending on the number of volunteers, obviously we have, we'll adjust the day of just to see which sections we do, and hopefully we get to do all 3 of them. Next slide, please, Mr. Gomez. Okay, collaboration and results. So the event is funded through our Stormwater Enterprise Fund. Last year, if I recall, the cost was approximately $1,500 with everything included. A lot of the stuff, like the equipment, we're getting through Keep the Cat Beautiful. We're getting some, like I said, the face coverings from Rivers Alive. And the city is providing, like I said, the hand sanitizer, extra masks, boots for volunteers if they need it. Again, Public Works Department, they did a great job last year helping and removing a lot of the trash from the South Fork Creek. So we thank them again for participating. Our firm, Collaborative Infrastructure Services, staff will be helping out as well. There should be about 5 of us, I believe, five or six of us. And, you know, at the end of the event, we try to collect all the trash bags. We try to sort through them if we can for recycling purposes. And tires are recycled by Bridgestone. They actually have a free program that they come and pick those up for us. So, you know, we just hope to get as much publicity as we can. I know with COVID and everything, you know, some folks might be hesitant to come out and participate, but for those that would like to, obviously we would like to have them out. Like I said, getting the word out, we're going to try our best to do all the banners and flyers, but if you guys know anybody that might be interested, my personal number is on all those flyers that you'll see and all the banners, so they can call me or reach out to, you know, Mr. Gomez, and that you can forward those contacts to me. Thank you very much.
Cash, one question real quick. Will there be t-shirts given out this year?
So the Rivers Alive, they don't have any t-shirts this year. They have those neck gaiters with the printed logo on them. They have some small sizes for some reason they're sending us, but we still have some from last year's events that we can pass out to anybody that wants. So they have some limit.
All right, thank you.
And are there any questions from the council at this time or comments? Can't see any. Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the public? Okay, well, we look forward to safe participation with this particular event. And so don't forget, it's March 27th. And we're going to actually have the grand opening Friendship Forest on March 12th. So this is just great for the month of March. The next agenda item is E1, which is adopt a resolution calling upon President Biden and the U.S. Congress to provide additional assistance to rental housing community. And I will have Vice Mayor Yasu to talk about this one.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. First, I just want to apologize for coming late, but it was my fault. I didn't have the password and I kept trying. Anyway, this resolution is calling on President Biden and the Congress to provide additional assistance to the rental housing community. And as we all know, Clarkston is heavily populated by most of our residents live in apartment homes. And last year, after we received the funding from the federal government for the COVID pandemic response, we utilized over $900,000 on out of the $1.4 million that we received was used for helping rental assistance, and I am pretty sure that was very helpful to so many of our residents who were not evicted because of that specific assistance that we were able to use. However, that funding has expired, and can somebody mute his phone? Thank you. And recently, I saw that DeKalb County started helping with rental assistance. They allocated, I believe, $21 million, if I'm not mistaken, and already that number within less than a month, they had to close the application because they were overwhelmed by applicants. And I'm pretty sure some of them are residents of DeKalb County. So in light of all this, we strongly believe that continued assistance is still needed. We have many people who still don't have jobs, or who don't who are not getting paid or earning the same as pre-COVID time. So we are pleading to federal government to continue or to have a different program for rental assistance for this year as well. And the assistance we are asking with this resolution comes in three stages. Immediate stage, which is the short-term emergency response, is to provide continued assistance to residents that has been financially impacted by the pandemic. And the midterm response is pretty much transition from early pandemic emergency response to a deliberate and sustainable recovery plan that provides resources to impacted businesses and residents. And the long term is pretty much was titled as Build Back Better, and rebuilding our rental housing stocks, focused on affordable workforce and middle market housing, and expanding federal infrastructure priorities to drive new investment in rental housing, including affordable workforce and middle market housing. And we hope that we will be able to send this to our president and also the Speaker of the House, as well as Senate Majority Leader and members of Georgia Congressional Delegation. If there are any questions, this is pretty straightforward, and if there are any questions, I will be willing to answer.
Thank you, Vice
Or if there are anything you want to add, Councilmember Carroll, by the way.
No, sorry. I think you covered it, Alwyn. I appreciate your presentation.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, both council members. For the rest of the council, are there any comments or questions at this time? Okay. Hearing none, and I think Councilman Carroll and Yasu, how does this differ from what is in the budget in Biden's plan now for rental assistance? You're on mute.
I think between the time I got this drafted and now, I think there has been some movements. I believe there was $24 billion allocated, but I still believe that it has not hit on. We haven't received any assistance or any funding directly to municipal governments or to our cities. So this is to bring that out and make sure that they are going to continue working on it. I believe that Moody's Analytics had projected that there are over 10 million renters who owe more than $57 million on back rent. This is for 2020 only. And so I am hoping that there is still a discussion, but we want to make sure that we also put in a resolution to encourage them to facilitate it and to make sure that this assistance comes to municipal governments.
Are there any other comments from the council or comments or questions? Hearing none, are there any comments from the public? Mr. Gomez.
Nobody signed up to speak on this item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gomez. We will move on to E2, which is Proclamation in recognition of Women's History Month. And that is an agenda item that I sponsored to do. So we wanted to make sure March is Women's History Month, and we wanted to recognize the contributions of women through the United States and Clarkston and everywhere. And so this proclamation just recognizes and puts emphasis on people understanding the importance of what women have done, not only from a political perspective, not only from corporate, but every day. And so this is the month to remind people of the contributions. We've made a lot of history, and so we're very excited about this. So this is the proclamation that we have in place. Any comments from the council? No. Okay. Any comments from the public, Mr. Gomez?
No one signed up to speak.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to E3, which is a proclamation in recognition of Read Across America Day. And so that is on March 2nd. And that's another one that I sponsored. And as you know, we have our early learning task force. And one of the things that we're trying to emphasize is the importance of reading. As you know, with COVID and the fact that many of our students are unable to go physically into school, the importance of reading is critical for their development. And so with this, on March 2nd, which also coincides with Dr. Seuss's birthday, we wanted to make sure that we encourage reading within Clarkston for our new people, our wonderful future and up and coming leaders, so that we can emphasize the importance of education. So I'm going to ask a small ask from my council members, if they want to read a book. And what we'll do is just put it online to commemorate March 2nd. You know, it can be a Dr. Seuss book and can be a short book, but just to also show how important it is to the city of Clarkston that we read to our children. And are there any comments from the council? Yes, Councilwoman Hopkins.
What was that ask of council members? You want us to do what?
Just take a video of yourself reading a book.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
like
that's simple ask.
Children's story or something?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Short and
All
sweet.
Right. Okay.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay. Mr. Gomez, are there any comments from the public?
Ms. Roberta Malavenda signed up to speak.
Yes, and I would like to thank Roberta and the Early Learning Task Force for their assistance with this resolution.
I just want to thank you all for considering the resolution, and to give a shout out. Well, first let me say that if council people do videos, we would be glad to share them with Refugee Family Literacy Program that is doing Zoom sessions with little ones, and also with our Ready School and others that we know are using Zoom. So that would be really awesome to be able to share those videos with some of the programs that are using Zoom around the city. And I would just like to take a moment to give a shout out to some of the programs in Clarkson that continue to promote literacy not only this month, but throughout the year. And they include Refugee Family Literacy Program that is sponsored by Friends of Refugee Parents as Teachers, our child care centers, certainly our schools, the Refugee Village, which is giving out free books at the Women's Center, our Ready Schools, which is operating by Zoom right now, 4 days a week with parents coming to Zoom meetings with their little kids and reading books. And it's sort of really exciting. And a new project that we've started at English Oaks with Burmese families and soon Farsi families. That's a direct result of the City of Clarkson CARES Act funding. And those families are receiving free Wi-Fi and computers and free books. And an ask, many of our groups are looking for new or slightly used children's books, including board books for infants. So if you know of groups that would like to donate books, you can certainly email me and we'll make arrangements to pick them up. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we'll move on to item E4, which is adopt resolution authorizing, among other things, the city manager to execute a lease supplement under the GMA direct leasing program for the lease purchase of a bucket truck, $91,324, and a pickup truck, $29,877, in the principal amount of $121,201. Mr. Gomez.
Thank you, Mayor. And this item, as you just read, is to purchase a bucket truck that the city had in the budget last year. We deferred the purchase to the current year. The bucket truck that we would use, among other things, for trimming trees, for putting up banners, for taking care of things that obviously our staff cannot reach. At least in the 2 years that I've been here, we have rented the equipment for that, but this had been put in the budget actually several years ago and removed, and then again that we deferred until the current year for the assistance to just accommodate more work that we're able to do, and particularly in the ongoing maintenance of our city. The pickup truck also, as part of this item, is to replace an existing pickup truck that I think Rodney can correct me, but I believe it's a 2011 pickup truck. So it is part of our replacement of our fleet for public works. And again, another purchase that we deferred from last year to the current year. We participate in the GMA direct leasing program as the agenda item states, and therefore subject to what appear very reasonable lease rates over the 7-year payback to purchase the items. We've been participating in this program for a few years. The documentation from GMA, including the stated rate and the amount that we would pay back over the life of the lease for the two. Of course, we would own the vehicles. It's not that we're leasing and then returning at the end. So we're just financing the purchase of these two vehicles over a 7-year period. And I don't know, Rodney, anything that you need to add?
No, sir, you about covered it all. Like I said, this is just the F-150 is to replace one of the older trucks. I think it has 130,000 miles on it when the mileage speedometer quit about 3 years ago. And then the bucket truck, like I said, it will be very handy with the banners and the tree trimming and a lot of trees hanging over Church Street in East Ponce that we cannot reach. And we had a big limb fall in the road the other day, and there's a lot of old limbs that we'll get right on once we get this truck in here, and we'll start a regular maintenance program with the trees.
Thank you, Rodney. Happy to answer any questions.
council, or do you have any comments or questions?
Not at this time.
Mr. Gomez, were there any public comments other than we got our money's worth out of that truck?
No, nobody signed up to speak on the item.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to E5, which is adopt a resolution authorizing, among other things, the city manager to execute a lease settlement under the GMA direct lease program for the lease purchase of a sanitation truck in the principal amount of $145,919. Mr. Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and sort of a companion item to the prior one, but this one's separated out because of the amount. This is to purchase a sanitation or garbage truck. The one that we currently have that we've been utilizing quite a bit since March of last year was purchased back in 2000. It just hit a little bit over 21 years. So we've gotten a very good, again, use of life from it. According to our records, we purchased that in 2000 for about $45,000. So garbage trucks have gone up in price, certainly even just in the last few years. In my prior two cities, when we purchased them, they were rather elaborate. So this price is about half of what we've been purchasing trucks in my two previous cities. But again, this is a similar program through the GMA direct leasing program. Again, will be to replace the existing truck. Just in the last 2 years, the current sanitation garbage truck that we have, we needed quite a bit of repairs, and likely due to the amount of usage this past year alone, but we spent just over $20,500 in repairs just in the last 2 years. So it's reaching its end of life after 21 years. It has, garbage trucks typically don't get significant mileage. Again, we're only we're under 2 square miles, and typically we had not run this truck very much until the last year, although we did run it, initially in the early 2000s, but it has just under 83,000 miles. But again, this item had been placed in the budget and was deferred from last year to the current year. Once we do have this truck, I know along with the bucket truck and the other Ford, our staff will be much excited to be utilizing the new equipment, avoiding certainly the maintenance costs going forward. But again, we have a fairly favorable interest rate to finance the purchase of the vehicle over the next 7 years. And we will continue with the process that we have, be able to certainly circulate around the city and pick up all the bulk trash and other items that clearly have increased and are only likely to increase as we add some of the additional housing that will have the single family garbage refuse collection, such as the townhomes on Glendale, the single family homes at the end of East Avenue. The apartment complexes, we don't provide the solid waste sanitation collection on there, but we do assist as we have this past year from time to time based on need. But we do request, again, these purchases of our fleet that have been in the budget now going on the second year. I'd be happy to, Rodney, anything else to add for the garbage truck?
No, sir. We've been very lucky to get as many years as that we have out of the current truck. We will continue to use it as a backup truck if we get this new truck, but we will not be doing any more major repairs to it. Once something major goes out, then it'll be sold or scrapped or whatever we can do to get rid of it.
Thanks, Rodney. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Gomez and council, do you have any comments or questions regarding this item?
I do, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I basically wanted to know the correlation between the sanitation truck that we have and our use with waste management. Basically asking what is the full use of this sanitation truck if we're using waste management.
Well, Waste Management collects the single family, small commercial, residential, the 95-gallon containers. And then we pick up all the bulk items and any additional items that are not in those containers. We've just not had very good really experiences with Waste Management for the bulk pickup. It's just something the city has been doing for several years, but in the last year alone, due to the virus, it's been an awful lot more just items thrown out to be picked up. So we supplement what Waste Management does, and we will continue to do that. Now, in the future, though, we will look at possibly whether we could take or alter the service so that we provide the service. Of course, we would provide the entire, obviously, cost allocation, and whether we would likely issue an RFP for those services, but it's something that we may be able to provide. Of course, we would need the equipment. This is one big piece of equipment that we obviously would need to have if we were to do that in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilman Iyasu, you had a question? Yes.
Yes, I just want to, I support what the city manager was saying. I think we need to also, if we're going to have this expensive machinery, we might as well consider getting in-house on our recycling, or at least one of them, or the pickup of the solid waste part. And I'm sure we might have to hire a few more people in our public works, but I think this is the big investment is going to be the truck. And my question also will be, are we going to, what we're going to do with the old one we have?
As Mr. Beck stated, we're going to keep it until we can no longer use it. And we will not be spending any more money for any significant repairs. So as we have these past 2 years, and then once we can no longer use it, we will dispose of it through our auction method. We will declare it surplus property and then go through our auction process.
Thank you. And Mr. Gomez, just to clarify, with our contract with Waste Management, we are responsible for doing bulk pickup. They aren't responsible for doing that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And were there any comments from the public on this item?
Nobody signed up to speak on this item.
Okay, thank you so much. And that there weren't any other comments from the council. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item E6, which is a resolution to create a task force to provide recommendations on policies and training for the Clarkston Police Department. And that's myself and Councilman Carroll. And so with that, as you know, Clarkston is a very unique city with different needs in terms of how we engage. I want to make sure I emphasize the importance of how our police department is a great police department, and they are doing everything in terms of their outreach to the community. So, but this task force is to also help to look at training that would assist our police department to be more focused on community policing. And so with the task force, it is comprised of no less than 9 people, public safety committee, in terms of anything, any monthly reports that they would do. The members and representation for the task force would comprise of people from the NAACP, Noble, our faith-based community, our schools, someone from mental health, domestic violence, criminal justice reform, a nonprofit that works with teens, and a multicultural organization. And we also want to have individual representation that could be members of the city of Clarkston, but not limited to the members of the city of Clarkston based on their expertise. And that's individuals with direct experience with criminal justice, a lawyer with prosecutorial experience, a lawyer that's done criminal defense experience, individuals with diversity and inclusion experience, individuals who work or volunteered with criminal justice, our communities with criminal justice, and individuals of diverse backgrounds in various ages. And so what they would do is within a year or 2 years at the most, provide recommendations and meet, and within 60 days of the conclusion of this, provide the final report to the Public Safety and Legal Committee, and then present that information to the council, mayor and council. And so it's really to just kind of look at best practices of procedures and operations. And also because, again, any policies would come from post. I know that comes from post, but just to look at the uniqueness of our community and look at some of the cultural issues and things in terms of training of how we can improve what we do in terms of community policing. And Councilman Carroll, did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered it. Thanks for taking the initiative on that, Mayor.
And are there any questions from the council at this time? Yes, Councilman Yasu.
Well, I actually am glad to see that the task force will be submitting their report to the Public Safety Committee, because I was just thinking this is just going to be another layer. I mean, but I think it's good that it's going to be doing the recommendation. Then it will be channeled through the Public Safety and Legal Committee. So I'm glad that it is going to be like that. So we don't have to double do the same things. So yeah, I like that idea.
I can't hear you.
Councilman Hopkins, did you have a comment? Okay, all right, thank you. Are there any other comments? Hearing none, Mr. Gomez, are there comments from the public?
Nobody signed up to speak, but I think we have a hand raised from Shana McAllister. Has her hand raised.
That's me.
Yes, Ms. McAllister.
I'm a member of the public. I just wanted to say, when I saw this on the agenda, I think this is a wonderful idea. I know we already have the Public Safety Committee and the Legal Committee, but I think that adding another layer and getting more of the community involved and having them more just more involved with the police department. I think that's a wonderful idea. So I just wanted to voice my support for it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And if there aren't any other comments, we will move on to item E7, which is amend Clarkston's Code of Ordinance, Article number 2, Property Maintenance Code, Section 566, notice of violation regarding a warning before issuing a citation unless issued in an immediate threat to public health or safety. Ms. Cowie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the mayor and council shall discuss and vote to clarify and amend the Clarkston Code of Ordinance to Chapter 5, Article 2, concerning property maintenance, to clarify that a warning shall be issued before a citation is issued for a violation of the Property Maintenance Code. As you can see in Section 5-66, the notice of violation, as it currently reads, and on the second page, outlined in blue, is the amended section as far as a warning notice and for violation a written warning provided to the owner, occupant, or operator of the property where a violation exists. The warning notice shall set forth a reasonable deadline of no less than 2 days and not more than 30 days to bring the property into compliance, which may be extended by the director. If the owner, occupant, or operator has received a warning notice of violation of any provision of this article within the preceding 24-month period, then no additional warning notice under this section shall be required before issuing a citation of any subsequent violation of this article. Madam Mayor.
Ms. Cowie, and I think Councilman Carroll, this was something that you talked about in the meeting, in the public safety meeting.
Yes, the Public Safety Committee did recommend passage of this item. And the idea behind this item is essentially that, we want the code enforcement to first give someone a warning and a reasonable opportunity to cure before getting a citation. I know that's currently the practice of code enforcement, but in the past in Clarkson, I know going back like years and years ago, that was not always the practice, and sometimes people get a citation without a warning. So the purpose of this is to clarify that before someone's cited, they do get a warning and they get a reasonable opportunity to cure, unless of course they've already been warned the first time, and then the second time they can just get the immediate citation. So I think this is hopefully strikes a balance between giving residents a fair opportunity to cure code violations and still making sure that we maintain public health and safety and enforce the code in Clarkson.
Thank you, Councilman Carroll. Are there any other questions from the council or comments on this item? Yes,
I just want to
Councilwoman
add that
Hopkins. Councilwoman Hopkins, she had her hand first.
I have a
Okay.
question. Could we go back up to the top of this where the new wording is listed? Well, anyway, there was a part in it about before a citation is issued to the owner or occupant. And I'm wondering if we can spell that out. Yeah, right here, I think. Owner, occupant, or operator. Because could we break it down in some way for a citation that would typically be within the realm of an occupant to repair versus something that would be within the realm of an owner to repair? And what I mean by that is I rent a house. If there is a tree on that house that I think could fall on the neighbor's yard, I call the owner. I wouldn't do that myself. I wouldn't remove trees. I wouldn't repair the roof, any kind of capital expenditure or repair on the property. But if something like that comes out of compliance, could I be ticketed even though I'm the person who is living at risk, maybe under an unsafe roof, but at the same time don't have the authority to repair it as an occupant, but the owner would? So can we differentiate that way somehow between when it's appropriate to even cite an occupant versus the owner?
Councilwoman
I think
Hopkins.
it's actually, or it doesn't really say. I mean, if I read it, it says or. I mean, the owner, occupant, or the operator. So I think that's pretty much. I mean, they're not going to cite a tenant, obviously, for something like that. So it will be the owner who will be cited. So, but it says or. So
yeah. So let's see. I think Mr. Gomez was going to comment too on that. Thank you, Councilman Iyasu, for your comments. Mr. Gomez.
No, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say something, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Howie.
Of Councilwoman Hopkins. And yes, we do. Our code compliance officer will do her due diligence before she is writing a warning, even a warning notice or a citation to either the owner, occupant, or operator. She, at her discretion, will do her research on the ownership of the property and based on the conversation that she will have with the operator of the property at the time. Okay. So yes, we do our background checks and research on property to make sure we have the owner's information as far as and the occupant or the operator, as it does state.
Okay, Thank you.
And then Councilman Iyasu, you had a comment.
No, I think I just was going to state, as it says, it's just or. It's not going to be both. So I was just going to help with the clarification, but I think she answered it. Thank you.
And we also want to make sure that for code compliance, we are wanting to make sure that we educate the residents or the business owners on property maintenance in the city of Clarkston. It is not our diligence to try to go out and issue citations for property maintenance. We do want a beautiful city, but we want to educate them first before we do offer citations. And that written warning can go with a verbal warning first, and that's the education process. And then we could do the written warnings, and then we could proceed with the citation if it's not in compliance within the stated amount of time.
My favorite phrase, educate before you legislate. Love it. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you. If there's nothing else, Mr. Gomez, are there comments from the public?
Nobody signed up to speak on this item either. Oh, hold on a moment. I'm sorry. We do have one. Excuse me. I think Mr. Medford. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Mr. Hadlock.
Yes, I did. I signed up to speak on it. I just wanted to speak in favor of it. Customarily, that's what code enforcement has done in Clarkson, is they've given you a warning first unless it was an immediate danger or threat. I think only several years ago we started having problems with one particular code enforcement officer maybe, and so that's probably what brought this on, or started to bring this on, the need for this. And I think it's a good clarification, it's a good straightforward and non-affrontive way to handle it. It's citizen friendly, and so I appreciate you coming up with this. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for Councilman Carroll to want to make sure that we codify this so that, as you said, we've had transitions. And so in the midst of transitions, some people will do some certain ways, some people won't. So if this is the intent of what we want to do, it's great to make sure that we codify it. So again, thank you very much. If nothing else, we will proceed to item E8, which is review request to vacate abandon Wagner Street. Ms. Cowie, would you please discuss this agenda item for us?
Yes, Madam Mayor. The mayor and council shall discuss a request to abandon Wagner Street from Kathleen Andres at 3767 Church Street, Meridell and Steve Goff at 3757 Church Street. In order for the city to consider a request to abandon a public road, the applicants must submit a letter explaining a request, explain the detailed portion, which is the termini of the road requesting to be abandoned, and why the request is being made. The city did receive on November the 19th, 2020, a formal request to abandon Wagner Street. Currently, the 226 feet in length Wagner Street is posted as a no-through traffic street. The applicant's properties currently have driveways to access their property off of Church Street and Wagner Street, and their properties currently abut Wagner as well. At the request of the city, the applicants have submitted an appraisal valuing Wagner Street at $5,000. At this time, a current survey and legal description of Wagner Street are not included in the appraisal package, as this is a substantial cost to the applicants at this phase of the request. At this time, the city has not received any formal plans for the development of the parcels that abut Wagner Street. Madam Mayor, I think the applicants are on the call if you have any additional questions.
Yes, we would love to hear from the applicants.
Okay. Madam Mayor, my name is Steve Goff, and I'm the owner of 3757 Church Street. And a lot of you know Kathleen Andres. She owns 3769 Church Street. And yes, we are requesting that Wagner Street be abandoned. And many of you are probably asking why. And Wagner Street has been and continues to be quite the cut-through street. From observation, we've been told by multiple sources. A lot of people use it to go from Church Street to Jolly Avenue South and to Indian Creek Way. It's a cut-through route to the multiple apartments that are located on Indian Creek Way and on the southern end of Jolly Avenue. We were informed there is a no cut-through sign on Wagner currently, and that was installed many years ago. And that was done with City Council approval. And that was done in an effort to mitigate and reduce the volume of traffic that the street accommodates on a daily basis. And we've also heard that there's going to be perhaps maybe a roundabout that is planned to be at the bottom of Wagner Street and Roland Street. But Kathleen and I are wondering if that roundabout wouldn't be better served at the intersection of Roland Street and Jolly Avenue. That seems where most of the traffic seems to flow anyway. And then, yes, you know, we do understand these are investment properties for both Kathleen and I, but we both are big believers in the city of Clarkston, and you know, we think we keep our properties well maintained and are proud of them. And you know, like I said, we want to be good city of Clarkston shareholders. But I'll let Kathleen speak on some of the other subjects.
Thank you, Ms. Kathleen. You may need to.
Thank you. This is Kathleen Andres, Madam Mayor and members of council. Thank you for putting this on the agenda and for allowing us to speak. I think that when we bought the property originally, Rita Thomas told me, I represented her. She was the owner of both those properties, and she would only sell those properties to people who potentially one day would do something on those properties that would enhance the city of Clarkston. Rita was a big proponent of the cottage ordinances that were passed in the city. And at this time, you know, there's a lot going on in the city. I, at 3769, have had residential tenants. I bought it in 2018. I've had residential tenants, and I now have a commercial tenant. I'm a licensed realtor in Georgia. It is very hard to find small, affordable commercial properties for business owners. And we'd like to do something with both of our properties, but the traffic issue on Wagner Street and the trash is untenable. It is, you can go out there almost any time of the day and it's just constant flow of you know, people cutting through. And some of the neighbors have told me the concern is whether or not the fire engines and the EMS could get down to the apartments down at on Indian Creek Way and on the south side of Jolly Avenue South. And as I look at the big map looking down, I see basically that there's Northern Avenue, North Indian Creek, and we also have DeBell Street, which could be used, which is just after Roland. And I agree with Steve, if there's going to be a roundabout on Roland to help mitigate traffic, it might be nice to have it at Jolly, because one of the council people was there yesterday with us, and we just watched people just go down and around and down and around. And quite honestly, we are investors, we don't live there, but we are stakeholders. We want to do what's right for the city. We also would welcome council's input on what you would like to see there. But I personally don't want to invest money and have people throwing what gets thrown on the property currently. And I also don't want to, I know I couldn't sell a house with that traffic there, or I couldn't put a business there with that traffic there. And that's why we're asking for it to be abandoned. And I have the gentleman, Brandon Gray, who did the appraisal. I invited him to join us on the call tonight. He's with Atlanta Marketing Data. And if you want him to answer any questions about how he came up with his appraisal, I he's here to answer anything. Brandon, are you here?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Okay, so this is Brandon Gray. And I have to tell you, I can't tell you how I sell real estate for a living, how many appraisers I talk to who wouldn't even take it up. And then one of my real estate attorneys said, oh, call Brandon. And I was like, I can't afford you, Brandon. And he was really, he's a great resource if you ever need somebody to do something that's challenging. So Brandon, I'll let you talk for a minute if that's okay, Madam Mayor.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
Thank you, Ms. Andres. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I was invited here to explain some of our findings within the appraisal report. And I thank Ms. Andres for her kind words, but I wanted to be made clear that, and for the record, that I am not an advocate for Ms. Andres or Mr. Goff, even though they did retain me to do the report. My report is unbiased and a third-party opinion as to the challenges that the property faces, some of the legal aspects, and the lack of market value in lieu of a value and use for the property. So, Madam Mayor, it's yours and the council's decision if you would like me to make a presentation as to the report, or after you guys have reviewed the report, if you have specific questions that you would like me to take this time to explain.
If you can give a synopsis for the report, then that way we can ask any questions based on the information you provide.
Yes, ma'am, I'll be more than happy to. And I'll try to make it as brief as possible because it is a fairly complex type of arrangement here. So at the basis, most appraisal products would look at something that's known as market value. And that's what most of the general public would be used to hearing when you're dealing with a property of what a property is worth. And the definition of market value is what a buyer in the general market would pay for a property and what somebody would sell the property for given its use. The challenge that we come up with when we're talking about Wagner Street or any other street is that it only has value to Mr. Goff's property and Ms. Andre's property as a thoroughfare and an egress and regress to their property. It doesn't have value to any other person within the community, any investor, because nobody would purchase this property to build on it. It would be unable to build on. The property, I believe at its widest point, is only about 20 feet wide or 19 feet wide. So any member, it would not be listed on a multiple listing service. It wouldn't be listed by an agent because nobody could build a house on it, put a business on it if we're just looking at the street in its vacuum. Given the history of the parcel, and I think it's important through our research, we learned that this parcel and street has come up in front of this council multiple times since 2002. So 18 years now. And over that period of time, the general public has made concerns about the traffic that's going through there. This council in 2005 commissioned a traffic study to figure out how to best curb this. Former Mayor Swaney had consider or asked this council to consider that the property be closed off and landscaped to prevent use. And at some point in time between 2011 and 2012, this council made the determination that the street should be made a no-through traffic street. So from my aspect as an appraiser, what that tells me is that this street also has no value to the general public. The public is not supposed to be using this street or finding value in this street because this council has said that going down this street is actually illegal. Now, the problem is that puts the burden on the city of Clarkston to abate people who travel down the street and actually ticket them, which, you know, again, puts an undue burden on the police force and everything, and you know, within the city. So taking all that into consideration, I was asked not only to provide a market value, but also a value in use, and then make a recommendation as to, in my professional experience of 20 years in the field, what would be the best course of action for the street. And within the report, we detail that there can be no market value again for this property because you can't have a typical buyer outside. Nobody would have a typical interest in this property outside of the two properties that it services and the city selling it. But what that brings up is what's known as a value in use, which means how much is the property worth to Mr. Goff and Miss Andres. And when we look at that, the best way to determine that is this would be akin to almost having an easement, where a property sells an easement to another property. And within the report, we've detailed kind of how that has been determined. And what we did was we took a look at what the typical size of a property would be and what the value of that property would be. And then we made adjustments to that property based on its surplus land, meaning land that wasn't usable for any other purpose, but was just surplus to the main portion of land. And our determination of that was that a 0.11 acre parcel, which is what we're estimating this as being, and as has been discussed, a survey has not been done yet, but we believe that should be fairly accurate, would have a probable price of about $18,500 within the market. But as we discussed, since this property can't be built on, it's not a traditional property, its surplus value, based on experience of other properties within the area that we've done over 20 years, is about 15 to 30% of what its actual market value would be. And so we determined that a most probable price and value of use would be $4,600. And then there's what we call the cost approach to value. Since the asphalt that's already on the street technically has value to it, how much is that value, added to the property and the cost there? And we determined the cost of land with the asphalt to be $5,500. And so when we reconcile those two, we arrive at a most probable value of about $5,000 for the property. And at that point in time, I'll open up to any questions. I know that was kind of a mouthful there, but if Madam Mayor, if you have any questions, or if the city manager or the members of council have any questions, I'll be more than happy to take those from you.
Okay, so thank you so much, both to our property owners and to Mr. Gray for giving us that presentation. What I would like to start off with is to have our city manager to kind of go through a historical perspective in terms of what he has from documents for the actual Wagner Street. And then from there, we can allow the council to make any comments or questions. Okay, Mr. Gomez.
So we do not have any documents regarding, excuse me, what was just stated. We have not found where the street was formally declared or listed as a no through traffic. Excuse me, I've had city staff explain that that was put up just by, before the council manager form of government, and likely a council member just placed, asked Public Works to go place that sign up there, but there was no formal adoption of whether they had the authority to do that. I'm going to infer that they likely did, but there was nothing that was formally approved that we have found. Other than that, we have no record. It's been a city street for a long, long time, just like the dozens of other city streets throughout and in Clarkston. That's what we know right now.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. And so we'll start with Councilman Yasir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually was going to ask our city attorney how we can handle this, because there seems there is already a sign in there, and as the city manager said, that there is no record of that sign, and I'm not sure how can we address first of all whether it was abandoned previously or not.
It's never been abandoned,
Right.
Because there's never been any formal, this is Robin again, there's never been any formal action. But to manage the street, any city street, whether to really for any, I mean, typically cities, including us, we would look to improve a street. That means to either mill it, resurface it, add landscaping, add sidewalks, look at the speed limits, obviously provide a police enforcement as needed. So, which is all of what I just mentioned is what typically every city does. So that falls under the administrative component of, in this case, in the city, which would fall under the city manager. So the council would not need to take any affirmative action to do that, but they can, but it's not required. I just wanted to say that. I think, you know, Stephen, if you have anything to add.
I have a few thoughts. I mean, there's a few different. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Yasu.
No, I was just saying, I just want to clarify my question because we have a sign there. We all see it. And my concern is if there is a sign in there and this street was never abandoned and to put a no through traffic, what would be the regular procedure to make a street a no through traffic? Most likely should have been abandoned before. I'm just curious so you can help us in understanding what the process should have been and where do we go from here?
Okay, sure thing. So first, I think it's helpful to define our terms because some of the terms that we're using do have specific legal meanings. To abandon a street means an official action by the governing body to basically take away the property of the street that's for public transportation. That's a decision that the city government, in this case, the city council, would make. And when a street's abandoned, that means that it is no longer for the public to travel upon, but it's still city property. A different decision that the city can make is to limit its use. And it sounds like that's what happened here sometime in the past, that the city decided through whatever mechanism, we don't know, but historically, to try to limit it to no through traffic. But that's not the same as abandoning because it's still available to the adjacent properties for access. Then what the other thing we're talking about goes beyond abandonment, and that would be for if the city first abandons a road and it becomes city property that's not a right-of-way, then the next step is that it's possible to sell that property to the neighbors for fair market value. So the abutting properties on either side would have the opportunity to buy the property up to the middle line for fair market value. And, you know, we heard from the appraiser what he thinks that there's different ways of looking at the value. I believe that legally, the only value that would be appropriate is the fair market value, not the easement value. That would be 2 steps down the road. Now, if I understand the situation correctly, and it's correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like what the neighboring property owner wants is to stop traffic. So there's a third option. That is to close the road. And the city council could take action to say this road is closed. That goes beyond no through traffic. So if a road is closed, it could be physically physical barrier erected that would be removable if the city changed its mind. Broadly speaking, I would advise the city council to be very careful about letting its right-of-ways go to private property owners, because it's very difficult or impossible to predict how this property might be valuable to the city in the future. And sure, I mean, it's property. Maybe something valuable comes in next door and it becomes worth a lot of money. Maybe the city of Clarkston gets a lot of great developments, and one of them is next to this. You know, I can't predict the future, but I would just advise caution. But that's just my 2 cents. I'm not the policymaker.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Councilman Iyasu, did you have a follow-up to that?
Yes, and I just want to go back to the property owners now. So having heard from our city attorney, I think we definitely have to have this conversation going, but I really am willing to entertain a different approach in terms of settling, or addressing the traffic concern by making it either one-way road, or putting speed bumps, reducing the speed limit, or I think we also could consider a different approach and make sure that we continue cleaning it up in terms of the cleanup, I think. But I think I just want to see if the owners of this property are also willing to see if other solutions would help them alleviate their concerns, such as speed bumps or reducing the speed, and also or making it a one-way.
I don't know if Steve wants to say something. I think what Attorney Quinn said, and excuse me, Madam Mayor, I apologize for not addressing you first, but
that's okay.
That was the fact that the city attorney made a statement that our land may be valuable to the city is really concerning to me, because an apology if I'm incorrect, Mr. Quinn, but that comment comes with eminent domain and condemnation, and how
No, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Well, wait a minute. Steve and I are both builders and developers. Steve,
okay.
The follow up. Okay.
I was referring to the roadway, the property that's owned by the city, not your private property.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, if it was closed, how would we have access? I mean, it would be great if the street was closed. How would we gain access to our 2 houses?
Well, that's why I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that they have separate access to Church Street.
No, they do not.
They only have the only public access is Wagner.
Yes, sir.
Well, no, one property does have access through Church. There is a driveway on there.
No, who is speaking?
This is Robin Gomez, city manager, but I'm pretty sure because I pulled up into the driveway, maybe I was on the wrong, maybe I was on your neighbor's property.
Yes, you're on the neighbors, because I have a survey and that belongs to the red house.
Okay, even though it pulls up almost to your property?
Yes, it does.
Either way,
it belongs to the red house.
So if the road was abandoned,
that I had done of the property before I bought it.
Yeah. Ma'am,
Mr. Quinn wanted
do you
a
mind
question.
if I ask? I have a question. Under the proposal that Wagner Street would be abandoned and become private property, where then would your access to a public street be?
Steve, you want to?
Well, I think it would still predominantly be off of Church Street. And then we would, it would come down and we would have our driveways like we always would to those properties. We could always have some sort of fencing or something across the back of the property on Roland. But but you know, it would just kind of serve as an almost just an extended driveway to our two properties right there.
So the public street access would be Church Street.
Correct.
Church Street, Lovejoy, North Indian Creek, and what's the
He's
other
referring
street?
to your property.
Oh, our property, Mr. Gomez, it would be on Church Street.
Same
Yes, sir.
direct right.
The two,
I wish the driveway on the side of my house was mine, but it is not.
So Councilwoman Hopkins, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to verify what the ask is here. What I'm hearing is that this road should be abandoned because it has no value to the city because it's much too popular and everybody's using it. So that sounds to me as if it's highly valuable to the city as a thoroughfare. People who live on Rowland and live in the apartments back there are using it, and the excessive amount of traffic, i.e. the excessive use of that road, is bothersome for your ability to develop it. But for the residents of the city that are using that road, clearly there's a lot of them where it wouldn't be a problem, correct?
There's two ways to look at it, and Mr. Goff, Steve Goff can say it. And first of all, the apartments are not in the city of Clarkston. They're in DeKalb County, because the people who cut through from Church to Wagner to Rowland to Jolly, and then they go all the way down to the end on Indian Creek Way. And that is not in the city at this point in time. When I bought the property and when Steve bought the property, we both wanted to do something to develop on the back. But I wouldn't even build a house there because nobody would buy it with that kind of traffic. So, I can section off the lot and just have it be a vacant lot in the city, and pay very little taxes on it, but that's not what I'd like to do. I'd like to do something that is beneficial for the city of Clarkson and for people who are live, work, business owners. And yes, it is a popular street, but the same people could travel on Lovejoy. They could travel on North Indian Creek. They could travel down Northern Avenue. They could, there's lots of other access points that could be traveled on. We're not doing it because we think it's a nuisance and we're trying to be prima donnas.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the council?
I can't hear you.
I was trying to see if there are any, Councilman Carroll.
So yeah, I had a question. City Manager Gomez, I don't know. I think some people expressed concern about emergency vehicles. Is it possible for someone from DeKalb Fire to speak to that maybe next week at the council meeting before there's a vote?
Yes, we will reach out to DeKalb Fire, particularly the Station 23 is typically the one who would respond to this area. And I've seen them go down Wagner, I think once in the 25 months I've been here. But it's, since if they're coming from Station 23, unless they're going to, likely, even if they were going down Rowland, they could use Wagner. They likely would hop on North Indian Creek and then make a right onto Rowland Street. Unless it's the aerial truck, then it's a little tight for them, but we'll have them here next week.
That would be good.
And just one more, council, to add to the comment Ms. Andrews made about folks driving to Jolly. I wanted to add that, DeBell Street, after the changes to the intersection of North Indian Creek and Rowland, which made that intersection a right in, right out, So now cars cannot, traveling in both directions on Roland, you cannot cross North Indian Creek anymore. And of course, you cannot make a left. So that altered a little bit of the traffic pattern in this area. Also, DeBell Street was closed. Well, DeBell Street was in terrible condition, and should have been closed, but then was closed for a little over a month while it was milled and asphalted and repaired and the stormwater infrastructure installed. So it reopened several weeks ago, nearly a month ago. So now a lot of cars are using that, but we know folks were sort of, you had to go around. I mean, I've seen cars because I followed cars, not in a creepy way, but to see their traffic movements, and it certainly appears that cars are trying to avoid Jolly, not the part that's in Clarkston, but as you travel down toward Indian Creek Way. And one of the main reasons is because it's in such poor condition, certain parts of it, particularly as you get closer to Indian Creek Way. So once DeBell Street reopened, and it does have 2 speed tables on it, it's significantly better than driving on Jolly. That doesn't help you very much all the time, depending on where you're going. But since that's reopened, it has alleviated a little bit of the maintenance, the flow of traffic in this area that has likely impacted Wagner, meaning possibly fewer cars on there. But the big issue with traffic is clearly cars, as Mr. Medford and other property owners and residents on Roland will attest, as well as the property owner and the occupants on the Wagner Street properties, are cars speeding up and down and just driving through the stop signs. And we've had some enforcement out there, but there will be the improvements to Roland as part of the path that will make it much more difficult for vehicles to drive realistically faster than 20 miles an hour. And we're still finalizing exactly what those will look like. I know there was a mention of a roundabout, and it's not going to be a roundabout. It's more of an ease about, or even a partial traffic chicane, again, just to slow down the cars on Roland, because cars coming or going to and from Lovejoy do tend to speed up on there. When we placed our speed trailer that detected your speed limit, it did slow down the cars. We're going to put it back on Roland again to grab that data. Just we found that the machine wasn't working very well. So we're taking the corrective action, but I just wanted to mention that DeBell reopening has helped somewhat.
And Councilman Carroll, did you have another question?
No, that was my question.
Okay, thank you. And to Ms. Andreas, a quick question. Your property right now is on Wagner in terms of the entrance. Is it possible for the entrance to be on Roland?
Anything's possible, Mayor.
Okay, I have to ask the question.
Anything's possible.
Okay, okay.
Anything's possible. Is it, I'd have to, I personally wouldn't want to do that. When Rita sold myself the land, I wanted to put cottages on there. Cottage housing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Steve, I don't know what you know.
It doesn't seem very feasible to run 100-something foot driveway off of Roland to our property, but.
So where does your property on Wagner end, start and end? So I guess that I want to make sure I'm clear.
It's from block to block.
At the end of Roland.
Yeah, it's all the way from Church to Roland.
So your property runs from Church Street all the way to Roland.
I think it's 230 feet or something, 226 feet.
Okay. And the entrance for it is designated on Wagner Street for both parcels.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So with that, I'm because I had a question. So with that, you can, if like you said, anything's possible, you can have the address to then be on Roland, or which I think is more flexible than Church. But I know that's not a preference for you guys. You want it to be more of a Wagner. Is that correct?
Well, we'd like to do something with the property that benefits the city. One of the residents asked in the chat, what do we want to do with it? What would everybody like to see there? I mean, what is there a need for that you have a lot of rentals in Clarkston. What would people like to see? I would love to potentially do small cottages that are potentially like rented to people who come and use the bike trail and then enjoy Clarkston for the diverse community and city that it is. I don't know what Steve wants to, if he considered that. I wouldn't mind doing that at all if it was financially, you know, something that would work. And I think that would be a great asset to the city.
And thank you for bringing those points up. I'm gonna, are there any other comments from the city? I mean, from the council, sorry. Okay, Mr. Gomez, are there comments from the public?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Let me get, to answer, I think your questions were answered. The image on the screen shows the two parcels that are currently addressed as 3769 and 3757 Church Street. They do run the length of Wagner from Church to Roland. So both parcels are 200 to 247 feet from Church to Roland. So I think you had asked, that was your question. We have Mr. Medford.
Yeah.
Good evening. Yes.
Mr. Medford, please provide your comments.
Yes. So I spent today walking, Brian Medford, Roland Street. I actually live 3 houses down from Wagner Street. And so I walked around today, talked to my neighbors and tried to get a hold of what's going on with this idea. I also emailed everybody in the council in case I run out of time. So closing Wagner Street, first of all, is going to force all the traffic down the driveway and parking lot of Carriage Oaks 4. Anytime there's ever been any sort of blockage on Wagner, people go straight to that parking lot. It may say, Churchway may say it's a street on Google Maps, but if you take a look at the picture I sent everybody in council, you see it as a parking lot. It is 20 feet wide. The houses, the apartments, it's only 5 feet from the curb to the front door. So if people are driving up and down Church Way, so that because they can't use Wagner anymore, and they will, somebody's gonna get run over. And I know there's families that live in that apartment complex. That's the first thing. We've already covered the emergency vehicles, so we'll move on to that. Sorry, folks, but removing Wagner Street really only benefits 2 people. It's the people that own the properties on either sides, but it impacts everybody on Roland Street, Jolly, and DeBell. And since we just redesigned the intersection of Indian Creek, the options for getting out of our neighborhood are already kind of limited. Today, went to the post office, used Wagner Street because I can't turn left onto Indian Creek anymore. I have to go around and come the other way. So another issue is it's going to increase traffic on the bike path. If you close off Wagner, all those people that are trying to get down Jolly are now either going to come down Lovejoy or come down Indian Creek, and they're already hauling butt through there anyway. And so they're going to be in more of a hurry to get to Jolly Street, whereas before they would have spent a couple seconds on Roland Street by going down Wagner to get to Jolly. This is not an anecdote. I live here. I watch it happen all day long. Y'all have heard plenty about me over the years about traffic on Roland Street. Also, in walking and talking to my neighbors today, I only found one other person who's been contacted by the landowners about this idea. One, and that was the person who rents the house, who actually is on Wagner Street. The other landowners that are really right next to this whole Wagner Street property haven't heard anything. And I would hope that if we're going to require somebody like Proscunio to have a cup meeting and have to invite everybody within so many feet to even, teach kids music lessons for free, if we're going to talk about closing a city street, you better well invite every single landowner that's affected by the nearby area, because it isn't just the people on either side, it's us that it's affected too. And I'll also echo that those no through access signs were put up illegally pretty much. And I remember when it was done. And I remember when the guy that used to live on one side of Wagner used to block the street with his truck because he was trying to enforce the no through traffic signs. The reason he was doing it with his truck is because even our old police chief Scipio wouldn't enforce those no through traffic signs. So in my opinion, the no through traffic signs need to be pulled up because they have no legal reason to be there. Like I said, I am worried about the safety in the area. I am especially worried about the traffic that'll be shoved down Church Way in the apartments. There's a little girl that lives there I know of, about the same age as mine, 5 years old. And if people can't go down Wagner, they will fly through that apartment parking lot instead. This doesn't make any sense after looking through it and taking a look at the community and talking and looking around. Like I said, take a look at the picture I sent you in council, and I think the city should just do the right thing and think of the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Medford. Mr. Gomez, are there any other comments?
Yes, we had, I don't think he's on the call. Mr. McGee, are you on? Don't think so. We also had Mr. Hadlock.
Mr. Hadlock?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to say thank you to the staff for their recommendation against abandoning this street, and I hope that the council follows that recommendation. We got a good professional staff, especially when I agree with what they're recommending. Wagner Street is a very well-used street by the citizens. I use it sometimes, and I live off of East Ponce, way down the other side of North Indian Creek. My property backs up onto Friendship Forest, but I will go down Wagner to get to Roland, or if I'm coming from Memorial Drive down North Indian Creek, I'll go to Roland, to Wagner, to Church to get onto 285 if I'm going somewhere down that way off of 285. It's a great street to help disperse traffic off of Church Street instead of just funneling it more and more into one more tightly restricted course. And so I think it's very valuable. I think that the real solutions are to get rid of that stupid no through traffic sign that Emmanuel put up as a favor to Rita Thomas, to put up speed limit signs of 20 miles or even 15 miles an hour. We got 15-mile-an-hour speed limit down Norman Road by Milam Park. Put a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on there with a couple of speed breakers, and perhaps make it off limits to all vehicles over a certain weight, and that would restrict its use from school buses and dump trucks and garbage trucks and the like. Well, I don't know about the garbage trucks. They may still have to pick up the garbage there. But I am, as far as the trash goes, I mean, a vacant lot is a magnet for trash. As far as the lots not being buildable as they are, if Wagner Street is not closed off, I don't believe that for 1 second. I don't know. I think Miss Andres is maybe getting some bad advice on that, which it kind of surprises me because she is an experienced realtor. I have absolutely no reason to see why they would be of no value, or why you would buy lots that would be of no value unless you got at some future date, hopefully something that you wanted from the city, and the abandoning of the street. So I think they are perfectly buildable as they are. I think that they serve only the development purposes or the building purposes of the two owners of these properties. If you abandon Wagner Street, perhaps they will subdivide those lots, make them into more, make Wagner Street part of the yard for more houses than they could otherwise fit on either side of Wagner Street. But I think that this is an important city street. The citizens use it. It's obviously very popular. If you look at the comments and the threads on Nextdoor and the comments in the chat here tonight. And I once again thank the city staff for doing a good job on this. And I recommend that the council not approve that we abandon this street. We've abandoned streets before, and it has really become, it has resulted in an inconvenience to the citizens on a couple of those occasions. Harding Street up near Friendship Forest or Hardage Street, I think it's called, and Hill Street where the IBC is. So it's just created more problems when that's happened. And I foresee that happening here. Also, as Mr. Medford noted in his chats, fire trucks use that. That's important for fire trucks, obviously. So I'll stop at that and thank you. Please vote against this. With all due respect to Ms. Andres and Steve, I'm sorry I don't see your last name. I'm very much opposed to this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor? This is
Yes,
Steve.
I'm sorry.
I have
Yes.
something to add.
Yes.
Thank you. So, the state law regarding abandoning a public street, one of the requirements for the city to abandon a street is to make a finding that the city council would have to find that the street serves no public transportation purpose anymore. And it's from what we've heard tonight from the residents, it sounds like that's not accurate.
So that step one for even considering it.
Right. I mean, so abandonment is a official act by the city council. And under the state law, part of the abandonment must include a finding by the city council that the road that's being abandoned does not serve any substantial transportation purpose. And usually that means that it's fallen into disuse, or many times it's never really been opened. But it sounds like in this case, those are not the facts.
Right.
Mr. Gomez, are there any other public comments at this time?
Well, we had, I just want to mention in case they're on Adria Marshall and Lawrence Bergman, they were included in the email that Ms. Andres sent requesting access to the meeting. I don't know if they're on the call. If not, those were the only ones that signed. Oh, and Allison Sanchez.
Madam Mayor, I see also Ms. Hood has her hands up.
I'm sorry. And Ms. Hood.
Okay. If no one else who signed up, Ms. Hood, you wanted to make a comment.
Yes, thank you. Stephen, thank you for referencing that state law. That has been my understanding because that issue came up when I worked for DeKalb County. And I think it might be good for our code to include a reference to that so that we don't have to spend a lot of time discussing something that is clearly not in compliance with state law. This road has public value. It is part of our transportation system. And therefore, it is a benefit to all citizens, not just those who are adjacent to it. I think that we have developers who would like to develop in Clarkston, and if they can do that with property that has access on 3 streets, that would be a good idea. There is some circular reasoning going on that they don't have any access except on
Wagner, yet at the same time, they want that access to be canceled. So it has public value, whether emergency vehicles drive down it or not. I think case closed. I would recommend that council deny this request. And I also think Brian brought up a couple of good points. We should have some procedure when this kind of request comes up so that property owners are notified that someone has requested the abandonment of part of our transportation system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hood. Okay, are there any other comments or questions at this time?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Gray.
Yes, ma'am. As the appraiser, I'd just like to expand on Mr. Quinn's comments about the state law. He is correct that it has to be of no public use, but if the no through traffic street is legal on there, if that is the case, then the city has already determined that that street cannot, by definition, have value to the rest of the community because their use of that street is illegal. So if it's determined that that no through traffic street sign has been put up by the county, then you've already met the litmus test of determining that this is not supposed to be used for public use. There. Now, if the sign was erected illegally, then the question should be asked, has the city ever issued a ticket for anybody traveling down Wagner Street and using it? And if they have, then the city by default or by definition has upheld the no through traffic street and and has enforced that, making it a legal standard for the street. So that's the only, from an appraisal standpoint of it, that's the only thing that I just wanted to bring to attention.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mayor and Council, this is Robin. We have not issued a ticket for driving on Wagner Street, at least in the 25 months I've been here.
And this is Councilman Carroll. Can we are we sure that it was never authorized for that sign to be put up, or can we be sure by next Tuesday?
We haven't found anything in any of our records or meeting minutes or anything else that it was ever, that it was that the council, the mayor and the council took an act to declare that Wagner Street would henceforth from a particular date be closed to any through traffic. And as has been stated, there was never any enforcement. Apparently, no enforcement for many, many years. I can only attest to the last 25 months.
Thank you for those. Yes. Councilman Yasu.
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry. I think we also could reach out to the former Mayor Ransom. I think he actually definitely knows a lot more about this. So we could ask him if there was ever. I think that would be something that, if that's doable. He used to come to our council meetings a lot, but I haven't seen him for a while. But I think it might be a good idea to reach out and see the history of it.
That would be great. And I think we even have Councilman Hadlock, former Councilman Hadlock was on the council maybe during that time as well. So Mr. Gomez, you were going to.
Yeah, former Mayor Ransom has told me that, yeah, they put the sign up, but I don't think he's ever explained to me that it was approved by council. It sounded like it was just a decision that the mayor, whether he was the mayor at the time, just went out there and had the sign put up. But again, we have found no record, no documentation in any of the meeting minutes or anything that the council as the governing body took any action. As I stated, though, I don't believe that that was a requirement to do that. As I said earlier, there are administrative processes that can be made, and it appears that that is what happened however many years ago.
I have a question.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
No, I'm sorry, Councilman Johnson. I'm sorry, I'll be quiet.
No, go right ahead. Go right ahead, Kathleen.
Go ahead, Ms. Andres.
I was just gonna ask, it's been up there I've owned the property, it's been up there for at least 4 years since we owned the property. I mean, we meaning Mr. Goff bought in 2017, I bought in 2018. And it's not like a homemade sign. It is a legal road sign, at least it appears to me in my unknowledgeable, I mean, I don't make road signs, so I don't know, but it looks. But has the city not accepted it as a no-through street because it was never taken down?
This is Robin, as I stated, we just haven't enforced on it. So, and we've allowed the traffic to use it just like any other street. And as has been stated at this meeting, it likely should just be removed.
Well, I would like to state as a landowner, I would like it not removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Councilwoman Johnson.
And my question was for Robin, and it basically lines up with the same question. I wanted to know, with the sign being there and with you not finding record of council being involved or that not being the process, what was the next step for the sign was my question.
We would just remove it.
Okay, so we thank you all. Thank you both Steve and Catherine for your information, and Ms. Gray for providing your presentation in terms of the appraisal, and the community for your input on this item. And so next week, the council will make the decision in terms of next steps and where we will go as far as this closure of the street. So to all, thank you very much for your information and comments. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is E9, consider adopting a mask mandate ordinance. Mr. Gomez.
Yes, Council, as we discussed previously about adopting the mandate that folks out in public and or in public places inside as well as outside be required to wear a mask. Back in July, the council adopted a resolution again requiring that anyone in public be required to wear a face covering, a mask while indoors, to include employees and anybody entering a public place, essentially any type of store, retail outlet, restaurant, etc. About the only exception would be obviously, while eating or drinking, or children under the age of 5, or those who could not due to a documented medical or behavioral. The resolution also required a face covering outside when people who were not related, lived in the same household, could not maintain the requisite physical distance, the 6 feet. So discussions by the council have been whether to make this an ordinance versus a resolution. The resolution did incorporate that we would issue a warning if the person was found to be in violation after being warned and would not wear a mask face covering, then the city could issue a fine of $25 by the court. However, I think Mr. Quinn could clarify, but we would not be able to utilize the court, I don't believe, for violating a resolution. It would have to be an ordinance violation.
Well, I think we could use it, enforce the resolution with the citation.
Okay.
It's really the different, I mean, they're both official acts of the city. It's more about whether you want, what kind of permanence do you want it to be? The ordinances are placed in the book, but you raise an interesting point there. I haven't checked on that. in the past, we've always done ordinances if there's going to be a enforcement like that.
Well, and also it doesn't really, the issue brought up regarding the governor's executive orders and essentially a preemption for local governments to be able to adopt mask face covering ordinances. I know Mr. Quinn did a little bit of research on that, and really the determination was that really the state would, or the government, really there's very little that the state could do. There are a few cities that have adopted ordinances requiring the mask face coverings. So I know, Stephen, if you wanted to add to that as well.
Right. I mean, so it's clear that the governor's intention is to preempt, meaning to stop cities from having such an ordinance. And what's a different question is, does he have the authority to do that? That has not been resolved because it just hasn't made its way through the courts. I don't know whether there's any cases like that in Superior Court that might eventually get to an appellate court. I haven't heard of them if there are. I think it's very questionable that the governor has the authority to preempt cities. Definitely the Georgia legislature has that authority, but they haven't passed such a law. The governor cites his emergency powers in a particular section of the Georgia law that the legislature did pass, but it says nothing about preempting cities. It says that he can basically overrule state administrative rules. So basically his own rules in an emergency, he can say those are canceled. The way this would get tested would be someone is issued a citation, that person goes to court and defends it by saying the ordinance was invalid because the governor preempted it. And then the city would basically have a choice to defend the ordinance or not. And if it did, and if the defendant kept fighting it over the $25, eventually a Georgia court would decide, but it would probably be, let's pray, after COVID was over.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn and Mr. Gomez. I know this was something that came up during our retreat as a concern for the council, that we wanted to do and make whatever efforts we could within our community to ensure that people were following and wearing a mask. And so I know that Mr. Gomez the city manager has put out mask signage. I think there's some concern that the signages over time have been moved or taken down. But I think, we really want to emphasize the importance, even after people get vaccinated, to wear your mask, just to make sure that we can go back to some type of semi-normalcy within our communities. But so from what we talked about, I think a couple of things in terms of doing follow-ups with our businesses and making sure in terms of communicating with residents about the importance of wearing the mask. And I know that even from the task force, we're going to make another quarterly mass distribution and make sure that people have access, and we try to make sure the businesses have access to masks to distribute. So council, are there any other questions or comments? Yes, Councilwoman Hopkins.
I have a concern. The one that we passed last July, if you go down to the section on, the therefore on the enforcement, it says under item number 4, the city manager and his designee shall enforce this ordinance as follows. In that case, it's referring to it as an ordinance, although it says resolution at the top. So I think a lot of us were thinking that we were passing something enforceable, especially since we did have quite a bit of debate over the dollar amount on it, because we really trying to do this to make money. We want to, sometimes people, speeding, they would risk lives, risk their family, cause all kinds of, but you tell them they're going to get a $15 ticket and they slow down when they think there's a police. Sometimes a little thing is easier to wrap your head around. And so we deliberately set the fee very low, but this part does refer to it as an ordinance, although it says resolution at the top. I would like to see it expanded though, so far as expectations on the city, so far as advertising this and making it clear, because again, if you ask people or recommend that they do things, they just kind of like tend to ignore it or blow it off and move on. But if you say, okay, you will be fined by the city, this is city ordinance and it's mandatory, they'll tend to listen, even though it's not, a huge fine. Nobody's going to lose their, probably driver's license or whatever over this. But I think we need to, the signs that we have now actually has the font on where it says ordinance is probably a size 15 font, and it has pictures of masks on it, as well as bicycle helmets and boat safety vests. And I think putting the possibility of dying from COVID on a par with possibly drowning during a yachting accident from not wearing your boat life vest in Clarkston really undersells the seriousness of the COVID. But that's the signs that we're using now, I think, are much too small to be effective and too busy, and we don't need bicycle helmets and life vests on it. I think we need to really, I drove around town the other day because when we were at the retreat, we showed those signs. I'm like, I've never seen those signs before. And I took pictures of about 20 business fronts in Clarkston, and only 2 of them had those signs, and they were all mixed up with so many other signs, you couldn't read them. And then I went to Avondale Pizza, and they have a big sandwich board, 2 foot by 3 foot at the door. It says, masks in, masks when you leave, masks if you're not at your table. That's it. And it's a 2 foot by 3 foot sign. And they said there, people still ignore it. But it's harder to ignore a 2 foot by 3 foot sign than, these very small ones. And they are doing the same thing. I've seen some really large prominent signs in Tucker. 5 people in the store, maximum. You must have a mask covering your mouth and nose while in the store. But I think our signage and our communication and our education needs to be a lot stronger. So I would like to see that. But if Mr. Quinn says that this is enforceable as it is, I think also at the retreat, Councilman Carroll said that if we might want to put a sunset clause on this, 30 days or something. I know the Georgia Supreme Court on their whatever they call it that they were doing, they had to renew it every 30 days. So they couldn't just put it on the books and have it go indefinitely, because obviously we're all hoping this thing's going to end sometime soon.
Thank you, Councilman Hopkins. Councilman Yasu.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I definitely do understand the reasoning behind the ordinance or the resolution, and I support using masks. I wear masks myself whenever I'm in public place where I cannot distance myself. My only concern is Councilmember Hopkins herself did mention that that our education piece has not been to the point, at least who can say, and also the fact that our signage has been pretty not also to the point again, and considering the fact that we have a big immigrant population that does not understand what an ordinance means, or what a regulation means, or what city council means, or what resolution means. And on top of that, I mean, we have very small police force that is really this would definitely stretch the police force in terms of enforcing it, because even if the amount is small, the police have to still stop somebody, they have to process it, they have to give somebody a citation, or they have to still do some interaction. So I definitely believe this is practically not enforceable. Even if it's legally enforceable, it's not practical. That's just my perception and my belief. And in terms of educating, that would be great. However, this will put our police in a position sometimes where they're not comfortable, because they're going to have to write a citation to somebody if somebody refuses, or it's really going to seem, and it does look like an overreach to me. I think educating our residents will be great, and making sure that we tell people to wear masks is great. But my just concern is giving people tickets, and the fact that it's not like nobody's wearing masks. You can go outside. Most people are following. They're concerned about their health, and it really makes us like a nanny state trying to force people to wear masks. I think we need to focus on education, and we don't need to enforce. I really hope that the police will not be citing nobody. I just don't believe that we're gonna have to, and I just don't believe we have enough capacity and practically speaking to enforce this ordinance. So, and the other part is, like you said, we're gonna have to renew this every month. We're gonna have to vote on it every month, I guess, if it's gonna be renewed every month, or are we just gonna say until COVID ends and we're just gonna leave it there? I just don't see a lot of this in terms of practicality. So I don't support the idea of citing people, but I do support the idea of educating people about wearing masks, or about the pandemic, and overall just continue with education piece, instead of bringing this back again and try to enforce it with our police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Iyasu. Any other council comments? Councilman Carroll?
So my thought when I suggested making this an ordinance is, my understanding was from the tweet that it may not be enforceable in its current version. If Stephen is saying it is enforceable in its current version, then it may be best to leave it as a resolution. And then, I understand what Vice Mayor Yasu is saying, that it probably will not, I don't think any tickets have been given out. I don't expect a lot of tickets in the future. At the same time, I think it's good to be able to put in the stores that it is required by law that you wear a mask. I think that does have some implication. I think the store owners can probably use that as their excuse for telling the customers to put on a mask, even if the customer just say, hey, it's, make the city the bad guy instead of the store owner be the bad guy. So I think there is some benefit to that, even if it's not actually, a lot of tickets are not actually being given out. But the other thing I would say is that in regards to expiration, I do think, inshallah, we're coming to the end of COVID, that hopefully people will be widely vaccinated in the next couple of months. And we may want to think about revoking this resolution at the point in time when the vaccination is wide enough to where it's no longer necessary. So, but hopefully we'll have to come to that decision soon, but we're not quite there yet, I don't think.
Thank you, Councilman Carroll. I think Mr. Quinn, you wanted to make a comment?
I was just going to say, if the council doesn't mind, I'd like to take a look at this question of, how enforceable is the resolution and would it need to be an ordinance? And I can address that for you in the next day or two. If there's an interest in me doing that. And I also wanted to mention that, I know that Ms. Hopkins is correct about the way the Supreme Court is handling their COVID emergency orders. But, you know, the way we have this resolution written and the way that a potential ordinance could be is that it's just in effect until it's revoked. And so you know, that I believe that that's the reason we did it as a resolution. Trying to think back to last year was at the time we didn't have a good frame of reference for how long this was going to be going on, and we thought it was going to be short term, and that's maybe why we steered to a resolution. So, but in either case, I think that, you know, the council would act to get rid of it. So if we, and also the other thing I wanted to mention is that if we want as a council to require businesses to post a certain sign, that's definitely something that we could do.
So, Mr. Quinn, would that be an amendment to this one or a separate resolution or ordinance, whichever one?
I think, you know, if we want to be, I do think there's something to be said for the force of calling it an ordinance. Even if a resolution is just as enforceable, I think there's something to be said for the idea that this is a city ordinance, just as far as how that's presented. And I know Mr. Yasu made a good point that maybe that distinction doesn't ring with everyone, but the other thing is just doing it again would be meaningful, right? Because after the vote, then the city staff is empowered to say that the council has just taken action again on this, and it gives them the opportunity or the impetus to go to the businesses and say, you know, this was passed at the meeting and we need to implement it.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Councilwoman Hopkins.
I think it's maybe a good idea for us to renew this at this point, now that we're like a year in, even if it's going to be, you know, revoked soon. But tonight I went into Global Pharmacy and I was really pleased. They had two big signs on the door, and I went in and everybody was wearing masks, except the people working there behind the counter, and there was no mask at all, not even on their neck. And so I think I would like to see added to this ordinance that we hold the businesses responsible to police themselves and their customers. That would take the pressure off our police force if they say, hey, you have to have a mask to come in here. It must cover your mouth and nose. And to require the staff to do that as well, because going into a pharmacy to pick up medication and the people working in the pharmacy are not wearing masks is a bit disappointing. And right now we don't have anything to hold the businesses accountable.
Woman Hopkins. Mr. Quinn, you wanted to make a comment?
Oh, I was just sort of agreeing with that sentiment in the sense that whatever question there might be about being able to enforce a citation in court, I think it's clear that we have the authority to put regulations on our businesses.
Council members, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Gomez, do you have any comments from the public?
Yes, we have
Hear me?
Mr. Hadlock.
Okay, Mr. Hadlock, please speak now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I don't want to offend the libertarian sensibilities of the Mayor Pro Tem, but I believe that someone's freedoms end when they become a danger to me or anybody else in public. And so I'm very much in favor of requiring a bit of social responsibility that some people still just don't want to show. And I'm very much in favor of this. I do believe that and maybe Mr. Quinn would weigh in, but it may actually be not just that they'll get a ticket if they don't wear a mask, but if they don't leave the store when they're told they have to be in the store to wear a mask, they might get arrested. And so we have to be willing to push it to that point. And I think you do it. You either wear a mask or you don't go shopping. You don't go anywhere. You walk around outside. But I think it is bad for business not to enforce a mask ordinance. I avoid thrift town like the plague these days. No pun intended. It is a plague. You go into thrift town on any given night and you might find half the people in there not wearing a mask. I don't want to be around it. I get my second vaccination tomorrow. Maybe I'll be okay in a couple of weeks, but I just, I do it automatically. If I ever forget to wear a mask, I immediately go back to my truck to get it. It's just common sense. And I believe that Mr. Quinn, had a great idea, and I've mentioned it several times in the past at council meetings and work sessions, that we should require the businesses to put a sign on their entrance that says you may not enter without wearing a COVID protection mask or whatever, however you want to wear it. By order of the city of Clarkston, by ordinance or whatever, you may not enter without wearing a mask. And you can put that in several languages if you want, but every business ought to have it on their entrance where people can see it before they come in, and then the owner ought to either enforce it. That's the thing. If the owner's not going to enforce it, what's the punishment for them? They need to police their own customers. Say, look, it's not our fault. The city says you got to have a mask. And it takes the heat off of the business owner, but they have to enforce it. They have to tell people you can't come in, like the sign on the door says. So anyhow, there's my 2 cents worth. Madam Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hadlock. Mr. Gomez, are there any other comments from the public?
No, nobody else signed up for this item.
All right, so Mr. Quinn, it sounds like you're going to go back and check to see if it's enforceable as an ordinance versus a resolution versus an ordinance. It looks like we need to also amend it as well to include businesses. And we may need to look at a period of time for which this will expire. And so having the fact that we're only on phase 1A of the vaccination, it's going to be a minute before we, get to a point of where it's going to be a while. I think that's the easiest thing for me to say. It's going to be a while before we won't wear masks, and it may be something that might be part of our ongoing lifestyle that we may have to continue to wear masks. And so that's something we also need to take into account, but there also needs to be some type of checkpoint with this resolution ordinance, or however we decide to go with that. Mr. Quinn, is there anything else?
No, I will look into that. I mean, I think that if the council wants to take a new action, we might as well just go ahead and make it an ordinance and eliminate the question of whether it's enforceable as a resolution, right? I mean, if we're going to take an action anyway. And so, but I'd be happy to take this one as a starting point. My recommendation, I guess, as far as the timing, we might want to say that it runs for 1 year unless repealed sooner. Whatever the council thinks is wise on that.
Yes, Vice Mayor, I want to make sure, because I think Mr. Hadlock said Mayor Pro Tem is Vice Mayor. So Vice Mayor, yes.
Everybody else calls it Mayor Pro Tem.
But it's not. So, so Vice Mayor.
I think that, thank you. I just want to see, I want to hear from our police chief, I understand that the police chief will follow the policy, but I'm just trying to see, practically speaking, if our police force can enforce such ordinance if we make it as an ordinance. Thank you.
And that's a very fair question. Chief, would you provide some insight for us?
Yes, ma'am. If it's an ordinance, of course, we can enforce the ordinance, but we are out to educate. We will make sure that our officers have masks with them, that should they come across people that don't have masks, we can hand them out and explain the importance of wearing a mask. That would be our top priority to do that.
Do you need additional educational material to distribute to the police officers when they're doing this?
Say that one more time.
Do you need, for example, do you need some type of card or something to just kind of re-emphasize that point of wearing a mask and, you know, the importance of it, and that this is a resolutional ordinance?
We could look at making some flyers and handing them out, maybe in different languages as well, when we're out on the street.
Yeah, because I don't want to burden you with a lot of extra stuff.
Right. No.
Right. Okay. Okay. Is there anything else with this?
I'd like to say, I think there's a difference between educating the public on the need for masks versus educating the public that we have an ordinance that requires it. Because you could spend a lot of time going into the medical background behind, but some people don't trust Western medicine anyway, and it's not really relevant. If we're making it that it is an ordinance and it's mandatory, then that's what we need to educate people on. It's an ordinance and it's mandatory, and you just need to do it. And rather than giving them all the potential what could go wrong kind of thing, and then depending on the goodness of their nature, because, you know, we just crossed that landmark of 500,000 people died. You know, somebody said there was more people died of COVID than we had died in battle in the Civil War. So, you know, this is, it's not, I don't want to have to wait on people to decide that it's the right thing to do or be nice, and or my mother dies or I die. I mean, there's a lot of folks out there that cannot take the vaccine, and they don't have any data yet on whether or not, even if you do have immunity, if you can still spread it. So, we don't need to get into all that with everybody. We just need to let them know that if you're in Clarkston, if you're in a business, you need to be wearing a mask, or you could get cited, and don't worry about the reasons.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Hopkins. Okay, council members, any other questions? One last go. All right, thank you so much for a very lively but needed discussion. So let's move on to E10, which is consider amending, dissolving the Clarkston Development Authority. Mr. Gomez, I know this was another retreat item that we were following up on.
This, just as you said, Mayor, just to follow up the desire that the council, how you would like to proceed.
Council, I know, again, for the public who may not have participated with the retreat, this came up as a discussion point initially when both Councilman Ayasu and I sponsored this. This was to be the Downtown Development Authority. And because of the changes that we made in terms of having 3 council members to participate, it was changed to a Clarkston Development Authority. One of the other pieces to it was that they also changed the area that the authority had ownership to make any modifications or development. And that ended up being the entire city of Clarkston. And so that's one of those things we're not sure how that happened. You know, when we were doing the annexation, we had some issues in the past with the annexation when it went through legal. So we're not exactly sure how it was changed to the entire city. But this came up, and we wanted to make sure that we followed up and had additional conversation as to what to do, whether we just kind of figure out, do we want to do something now during this legislative session? Do we want to wait and kind of think this through and have additional input again from the public, and then present this next year for the next year's legislative session? So the council at this time, go ahead and make any additional comments. And I see Councilman Iyasu and then Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to Mr. Quinn. I just want to ask two questions on this. The first one is, if we decide, if the City Council prefers to amend the resolution and amend the structure of the limits of the territorial limits of that authority, what is the process? Do we just pass another resolution and send it to the legislature, or we can do it ourselves by just amending it? The second question is kind of similar. If we want to dissolve it, do we have the power to dissolve it, or we have to pass another resolution to dissolve it and send it to the State Assembly? Thank you.
Great, good question. So in either case of changing, I mean, if anything were to be changed about the Clarkston Development Authority, that change can only be made by the Georgia legislature. So we would have to request the local delegation to make it happen, and then the entire General Assembly would have to approve it. In the case of a standard DDA, like is available to every city under general law, the City Council sets the downtown area. And so if we were to hypothetically get rid of the Clarkston Development, the special DDA called the Clarkston Development Authority, and instead activate the Clarkston DDA, then we could set whatever downtown development area we chose, and we could change that from time to time as we saw fit. But nothing can be done currently except through the General Assembly.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm sorry, can I follow up a question?
Sure,
So
go
to
ahead.
dissolve it, so the City Council cannot dissolve this body, basically?
No, we could only request that it be dissolved.
Okay, I got it. Thank
you. Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to make the recommendation that at the time of this proposal, the community wanted a DDA. So I strongly believe we need to give them a DDA. I think we should dissolve this CDA and go through the proper channels of the DDA. And we don't need the any approval for that. It's already in place. That's it. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Carroll,
can't
did
hear
you have
you,
a
ma'am.
comment? Councilman Carroll, did? No?
I
Okay.
didn't have anything.
Okay. Councilwoman Hopkins, yes.
Can't hear you, Mayor.
Can't hear me? Can you
Yeah.
hear me now?
Yes. Did you call on me?
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to reiterate what Councilmember Johnson just said. I think we need to dissolve this because any changes we make to it, if we dissolve it, we have to go to the General Assembly. But if we do anything else to it, we have to go to the General Assembly. If we want to change the parameters, we have to go to the General Assembly. If 2 years down the road, we want to change the parameters again, we have to go back to the General Assembly. We would have to keep going back, which I think then becomes very cumbersome. But the reason we would have to is because we have in our setup given so much power where 3 people or 4 people on the council can do anything and everything. They can decide want. They can go get the financing for it. They can change the zoning to suit and, you know, do whatever. And so any changes have to go through the General Assembly. If we had an out-of-the-box DDA, we can set restrictions on the area, and then if down the line we want to change it, we can change it. We don't have to consult with anybody. And I know that takes a little less power out of the hands of the people on the city council and the CDA, but I think maybe spreading that power out a little bit would be a good thing.
That's fair. Yes, Councilman Yasu.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. I think so. In light of this, I want to ask Mr. Quinn, can you prepare this quick, or how long would it take you? I'm not sure, but until next city council meeting, I mean, until next week, is there a way you can prepare a request for dissolution of the CDA to be sent to our state assembly so that we can vote on it?
Yes, I can definitely do that over the next couple days. I think that it would be a pretty straightforward resolution because we don't have to worry about any details. It's just the city council has decided that we would rather have not have the Clarkston Development Authority and have the opportunity to do the one that's under general law. And I think everyone already knows this, but just to point it out, at the time that the city council a few years back sought out this special DDA, the stated reason was for council members to be able to be on this CDA, and that that's not possible under a general law or out of the box DDA. Or actually I was a little bit imprecise there. One member can be on there. One elected official can be on the out of the box DDA.
And just as a clarification, that one member doesn't have to be the mayor.
No, it could be
Right.
anyone
Okay.
that the
Any
city
council
council
member.
votes to appoint.
All right. I just want to make sure I put that out there.
You don't want
I'm just
to be
putting
in
it out
it,
there.
Madam Mayor?
I just put it out there. Okay.
So I should I go ahead and prepare a resolution to that effect?
Absolutely.
Sounds like, I mean,
Thank
at
you.
least bring it up. Okay. And then
Yes, please.
the last thing I wanted to say is that I don't know what the schedule is like at this point in late February. That'll be someone's going to need to interact with our local delegation to actually get it done.
I think Madam Mayor's taking
I
notes.
think once we pass it, we will make sure we reach out to our state legislature, and with Madam Mayor, I think we can get that. We can get it across them.
Well, if I may,
Okay.
Stephen, is it possible for us to start the DDA process? Because the nominations and selecting members, or do we have to wait until this is actually dissolved?
So that's a very interesting question legally. I believe I'm not able to give a firm answer on the question of whether it's possible, but I can tell you that my recommendation would be to not attempt to activate the out of the box DDA while this other development authority exists. I think that has a potential for confusion and trouble.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Gomez.
And just to be clear, Mr. Quinn will draft a resolution to dissolve the Clarkston Development Authority.
Yes.
That's the
I
council's
think that's what
desire.
I'm hearing.
Yes.
Council, is that the desire of the council?
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Gomez, were there any comments from the community?
Yes, we have Mr. Medford.
Mr. Medford.
Yes. So I've been listening about this topic for a while now, listening to the whole thing at the retreat the other day. So I think I've got my head wrapped around it kind of. My concerns are, I'd like to know how much this is going to cost the taxpayers. We've already spent money getting the CDA set up a couple years ago. We spent money getting it, vetted, written up legally. City employees worked on it. This won't be free. We still got to pay Quinn to do all this stuff. We're going to have to pay city employees to factor it all in. As a taxpayer, I want to know how much this is going to cost me. And I think it's an honest question because we do have a CDA in place. It's just not the CDA that y'all want right now. Is this going to be worth burning up our political capital, the Gold Dome, to try to rush this thing through? Because at this point, we're closing in on crossover day. And it's going to take moving some heaven and earth to get this thing pushed in 2021. Do we want to push that hard to get this done? Is it that important? And I'm going to go ahead and say it because I think there's a little bit of dishonesty going on here. One of the reasons for getting rid of the CDA was even listed during the council work session the other day, the retreat. And it's to remove one of the members. That was actually said out loud. One of the goals. And I will admit, one of the people that was placed on the CDA, probably not the cleanest way to do it. I will admit that. But if we're going to just dissolve these things when we don't like who's on it, that sets a pretty lousy precedent. And I'm pretty sure we'll be trying to be more professional in the city, as I've heard. And so I'd like to see this handled professionally if we're not going to speed run this through the Gold Dome. Maybe try to see what it does at first. So I understand it was not the original CDA that was put forth years ago, but nobody had a complaint about it back then. It's only now that it seems to be a really important issue to get rid of this thing. So sorry, folks, but I had to say it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Medford. Are there any other public comments?
Mr. Hadlock.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, CDA, in all honesty, I have not spent the time reading over this that I should, but I have paid some attention over the past several months, and the CDA kind of scares, Hades out of me. I don't like the idea of a CDA, and part of what makes me even more suspicious is that I never remember it changing from a DDA to the CDA. I thought we were always creating a downtown development authority, which ideally might be pretty good if we do it the right way. I don't think it looks to me like a CDA just leaves too much open for people people who are on that to get involved in our neighborhoods, planning our neighborhoods. It's extra legislative power that they're going to have. So I'm all for doing away with this CDA. I don't know how much money we waste, but we could save ourselves a lot of heartburn in the future. So I would recommend very highly, very strongly doing away with the CDA and changing it to the out of the box DDA, as Mr. Quinn put it. If we can do that this year, if not, just drop the thing altogether. We probably don't really need one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hadlock. Any other public comments? Mr. Gomez?
Those are the only two that signed up to speak. But let's see, there's Ms. McAllister has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. McAllister.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to put my hand down. So I, I've been following this, and I remember watching it happen. And my jaw dropped. And to think about it, you know, this person potentially has a lot of power to transform our downtown, you know, cityscape. And because of the way that they were appointed, I don't think that this should be allowed to continue. I think that the way that went down, because of that, it should be shut down. And I feel like we need to find people who don't have to be appointed in shady ways, you know, and get people that potentially, or I hopefully would have Clarkson's downtown best interests at heart. So thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other comments? So I'm glad everyone had a chance to make their comments. And I think what's also important is that from I know at least when we passed it, every time we talked about it, we called it a downtown development authority. We always referenced it as a downtown development authority. And then when I think Councilwoman Johnson went to her training, that's when it really came to light more so, because we hadn't activated, we hadn't done anything with it. And that's when it was kind of brought up that it wasn't a downtown development authority, it was a Clarkston Development Authority. And so I think however we want to handle this, let's do whatever makes sense. You know, if at the end of the day, we want it to be downtown, then making sure that we have some type of structure that's downtown. If it's something where, in light of the legislative session, and especially again with crossover day, that's why I mentioned at the beginning, is this something that we can wait? We don't have to rush and handle right now, because it will require, and thinking about all the other legislation that is going on, especially that voter suppression type of legislation that's going on at the Dome. Do we want to make this something that's a priority that we're trying to fight through and get through? Or do we even want to just wait and do it next year? Because right now, all of the participants aren't even trained. So right now, in terms of moving forward, that's something that we don't have to necessarily do right now. So again, whatever the pleasure of the council is, or however we want to deal with it, that's fine.
I just want to correct. I think everybody has been trained with all the members of that body, I believe, right now.
I had to cancel my training.
That is correct. Oh, yeah. But see, if we go with the DDA, we won't require 3 council members.
Right.
And then that can be one of our requirements on our downtown development, is that they're already educated. That, I mean, technically, because we want experienced people anyway. So that's just a suggestion. And then everyone would be trained.
I think asking the delegation to put it on there, I know there are a lot of important issues, but my thing is, this is not really, I think that would be a non-brainer to our legislators, because we're not asking them, all we want them is just, we don't want this. I mean, if it was something like previously, what we asked them, a cookie cutter thing that some people might not like, but this one, all we're asking them is just, oh, we don't want this body anymore. Can you guys, it would take them 1 second to vote on this. I mean, there is nothing to discuss on it, I believe, I think.
So the rule for this is what's called local legislation, meaning that obviously it only applies to one jurisdiction, not to the whole state. The rule for that is that it takes all of the Georgia House members that represent Clarkston, which given our size may be only one, and a majority of the Georgia Senate members that represent Clarkston, which again, given our size may be only one. If those individuals support a local legislation, then it pretty much automatically passes under the Georgia House and Georgia Senate rules.
So how do you guys want to proceed?
I thought we finished it. I think, please, Mr. Quinn can go ahead and draft that new resolution, and I mean, we'll try to send it to Georgia legislator. I still feel I think that can be done. They could put it on the schedule. I'm not sure, but if they don't, all that will happen is it will be sent to next year, and until it is not really dissolved, I have a feeling I think the body can operate or function. So there's nothing stopping here. So and if we don't get it done by this year, be it, it will just be done next year. But we could do our part from the city council point of view that we ask and interestingly, me, Councilmember Johnson, and Councilmember Hopkins are in that body, and it's not like none of us is in there and we are trying to dissolve something that is because we don't like the other members. I totally disagree with that perception, because we are not trying to do it because we don't like the members. That's absolutely not true. I think the main reason is by members of this body that that this resolution felt like it wasn't something that started at the beginning. So so there's really no harm done here. So I just want to say that I think, please, Mr. Quinn, if that's doable, I really strongly encourage us to go ahead and decide on it on next Tuesday.
I will prepare the resolution.
If nothing else for these agenda items, then I will entertain a motion to recess this work session and go into executive session
Madam
to
Mayor.
discuss a legal matter. Yes, Chief Hudson.
Hey, I just wanted to remind everybody that this Saturday at Refuge Coffee is our Coffee with a Cop from 10 to 12, and I hope to see everybody there.
With mask on.
That's right. You're correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. Yes,
I
Councilman.
have a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I have a motion that we move to executive session to discuss a legal matter.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. Are you ready for the question?
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion's passed. We will go into executive session. Once we are out, then we will adjourn the meeting. So unless you just want to sit around for us to adjourn the meeting, this portion of the work session is over. Thank you all. Okay, well, we're still in session. And so at this time, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Okay. Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second?
I second.
I second that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passed. See you next week.
All right.
And read the book. Give me a book. Videotape it. Thanks.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Everybody.
Good
All
night.
right. Bye.